Hey, and welcome to the YMS Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Colin Mansfield, and I am joined today by...
Seven Carnella.
There we go.
Yeah.
Seve and I, this is the third episode here that we're rolling with the YMS Podcast. So thrilled to have you tune into this. Today we're going to be talking about a challenge in the yard, specifically around safety. You know, what we're trying to do with this podcast is every couple of weeks bring kind of a new topic surrounding yard management. As you may know, yard management is sort of like the last frontier of inefficiency in the supply chain. It's kind of the black hole that gets overlooked very frequently. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today and why safety is such a critical component for any operations that are considering whether or not they should focus on yard management. I mentioned this the last couple episodes, but I think it's important to point out, you know, whenever I talk to a company about yard management and how they're doing, it's generally everyone's doing their best. You know, they're doing the best they possibly can to manage their operation. And what we found is that operations that really are going to benefit the most from yard management are those that are outgrowing their manual processes and their manual tools. I think everybody has something to be gained, but especially those operations that are growing, that are looking to grow, and that are scaling really can have a huge boon to their operation by focusing on yard management. So when we talk about safety, we're going to be covering two main areas today. The first one is going to be personnel safety. And I think this is probably what most people think of when they think about safety in the yard. How can we keep our employees out of harm's way, right? The second area that we're going to be talking about today is product safety, or what you might call product protection. How can we keep the things inside of our trailers or the assets themselves safe in the yard, which, by the way, does contribute to employee safety as well. So there's many of these items that are going to touch on both areas. I want to start off today by talking about personnel safety. Seve and I have both worked with many operations that have suffered from or are suffering from issues in the yard related to employees getting hurt, God forbid, getting killed. And so when we talk about safety in logistics, it's important that we're all on the same page. This is a really big deal. And any operation, I think, that is used to implementing solutions in the warehouse or ERP type solutions knows that safety is, it's its own market, right? Even in the software world and in the hardware world, there's entire companies dedicated to keeping employees safe. We had this quote. OSHA says that 25% of all warehouse accidents occur at the loading dock. And for every one of those injuries, there's 600 near misses. That means some operations are going to be well above that 25% of injuries. When we say docks, I think a lot of people think warehouse management. But in fact, the dock is that one main interface between the warehouse and the yard. So a lot of our customers that come and speak with us about yard management are also looking for a way to help manage their docks or to keep their docks safe. So just to contextualize this a little bit more, when people get injured or if they get killed because of these preventable mistakes, obviously the outcomes are disastrous, not only for the person, but also for the company, whether it's reputation, finances, employee or workers' compensation, for the facility itself and for the coworkers at the facility. And that, morale can really take a hit when there are people getting hurt. And of course, who wants to work in an operation that is not safe? The employees are probably going to be seeking that compensation from the employer themselves. So we're looking at direct loss of money, potentially. And, if another company is involved, in the case of a carrier or a customer, that can get even more hairy. Right. So it's important to, I think, note the costs associated with failing to focus on safety in the yard. Many operations know this. Seve and I have talked to dozens of operations, hundreds probably, who are familiar with the fact that, yes, safety is important. And when it comes to the yard, it's important as well. But as we've talked about, and as I mentioned at the beginning here, if the yard is being overlooked as a whole across the organization and treated as kind of a black hole, I think it's safe to assume that safety in the yard may also be looked at as sort of maybe the bottom of the barrel when it comes to safety as a whole. So it's easy to overlook safety issues in the yard because a lot of operations are overlooking the entire yard. So with all of that context and all of that buildup, Seve, I want to turn it over to you for a minute and go through a few discussion topics here when we think about safety in the yard. We have a part of our system that provides a map of the facility. We call it Eagle View. Some of the other yard management systems out there may have something similar, though not quite as robust. I'm curious, when you think of real-time trailer location visibility, how does that translate, do you think, into improved safety measures in the yard itself?
Yeah, great question, Colin. So, yeah, obviously it makes it a lot safer for personnel to be out in the yard in that you no longer have these individuals going around. Let's say it's nighttime and they're out there with a flashlight looking for a particular unit, opening up the back of trailers to see if they're either loaded or empty. To your point, our map already provides that information. It provides the location, if there is product in it, what type of product is in it. So it makes it a lot easier for those organizations to be a lot safer from that aspect because again, you don't have individuals running around in the yard trying to find a particular unit or particular product that may be inside of one of the trailers out there. Yeah, I can talk ad nauseum about some of the things I've seen out in different yards and how that really is a big emphasis on a lot of organizations because they've had an incident occur, or to your point, a lot of near misses. And one good way of eliminating those types of things is to minimize the number of personnel out in your yard doing those types of activities. So, without a doubt, the map and our solution is, again, like you stated, very robust and it helps from that aspect.
That's a really good point. If you can avoid altogether folks having those near misses, and if you can avoid having the number of people that oftentimes operations without a digital yard management or a designated yard management tool, they're going to be out there doing yard checks. They're going to be out there, jockey drivers getting out of their vehicle, getting back into their vehicle. Not to mention over the road, carrier drivers coming in and deciding where they want to park while you've got all these people running around. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that from a just reducing the potential for really reducing risk, reducing the potential for an injury.
Yeah, and you bring
I
up
was
a good
thinking
point.
about, you know,
I was going to say you bring up a good
oh, go
point as
ahead.
well
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
With live drivers, for example. I've been to some organizations where they have break rooms for the live drivers. They have bathrooms. Great facilities, and I get it. But I've also been at facilities where you know what they don't want the drivers to get out of their vehicles. They want them to stay inside their cabs. So again, that's another way that we facilitate that as well too, with the use of text messaging that we can communicate with those drivers. Once they're checked in, we can tell them stay in your vehicle. There's no reason for you to get out of there. Unless you're asking those drivers to move their tandems back, etc., which typically happen to occur at the gate. But again, another very useful tool to keeping not just employees safe, but also those coming from the outside as well.
Yeah. No, great point. I was talking to a customer recently, and they were talking about how even when you do have safety issues that occur, one of the benefits of having a robust yard management system is the ability to go back in time and investigate what happened leading
Yeah.
up to that incident and how can it be avoided in the future, right? So from a data perspective, you've got the live information going on the map, but you also have the ability to go back and replay how did this incident occur, or if a safety incident was avoided and you're able to identify that, how can we avoid it in the future as well? What good steps did we take to avoid that in the future? And interestingly enough, that data a lot of times I think can get overlooked in the decision making process. A lot of companies want the real time visibility. They want the gee whiz IoT solutions, and the data. Yeah, that'll be nice to have so we can establish how much money we're saving, and I can prove the ROI and yada yada. But I think when you talk about it in terms of safety, you're looking at how can we avoid people from getting hurt. Yeah, that'll protect our company, but that'll protect our employees as well. Plus, this customer actually even specifically mentioned they were able to coach individual employees. So instead of just putting out, okay, everyone, we got to do broad safety training again, you can go to that employee that was affected by that issue or that had that security concern happen and say, hey, let's coach that individual on the best way to avoid this in the future. That saves everybody's time and, of course, results in lower cost when it comes to training as well or retraining.
Yeah, without a
You
doubt.
mentioned yard drivers. Oh yeah, absolutely. You mentioned yard drivers. I was curious. You've done a lot of work on the ground with yard drivers, Seve. Whether that's rolling out new solutions or doing site visits to existing customers. I'm curious, when it comes to yard drivers, what are some of the safety concerns associated with them, and how do you think having a YMS can assist with managing and ensuring that those jockeys, shunters, yard dogs, whatever you want to call them, are remaining safe?
Yeah, great point, Colin. So, obviously, communication, clear communication with those drivers is key first and foremost. You want to make sure those drivers understand what their next task is and what's involved with that next task. And that could incorporate dock equipment as well too. For example, a lot of dock equipment companies provide uh, for example, a lot like you see on streets, lights of that nature that show a green or a red light to indicate, hey, it's safe to pull that piece of equipment away from the dock door. You can include messages in there to remind the drivers, hey, you're hooked up to a trailer. Is that light on the back of that dock or in the front of that dock green or is it red before you pull away? Just to indicate whether or not that that trailer has been released from the restraint and available to be pulled out of that door. So yeah, those are obviously some key features as well. And I want to mention as well too. A lot of times I've had customers come to me and say, "Hey, we want to track visitors that come into our yards." So, for example, you may have a mechanic that goes into the yard to work on a flat tire on a trailer. They may go in to work on dock equipment. But the key there is that originally the use case was to keep track of who was in the yard at any given point in time. And when I received the bill from the mechanic or for the organization that mechanic represents, and it states 5 hours, but they were actually in the yard 5 hours. Well, I had run into a customer that also had that same thought path. And then one day, out of the blue, they had a tornado in the area. And guess what? They've got visitors in your yard. So the nice thing about it is that they had those visitors there, but they could also communicate with those individuals because they had their cell phone numbers and were able to bring them into the warehouse and put them in a safe spot. So again, use cases that you don't typically expect, but they come out through the use of the system. And it just shows you how much more valuable the systems can be based on those types of opportunities of, hey, we built this for this purpose, but it's also great for the reasons that I just explained as well.
Yeah, I think that's a hot take there, Seve. Tornado prevention system,
Yeah.
tornado safety accountability.
Yeah.
That is wild, but it's a good point that you can't account for every eventuality, right?
No.
Obviously, things are going to happen that you can't expect, you can't plan for, but by setting up yourselves well with a system that is flexible, that provides you with enough tools to make informed decisions, you can avoid costly failures. And I'm sure nobody who was involved in the buying cycle of that YMS was thinking, oh, this will help us the next time there's a tornado around, right?
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yep. Yeah.
I
No,
want to
but
turn our attention real quick. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, yeah, but yard drivers in particular, thrive in those environments now where safety is of the utmost importance, number one, and then secondly, we can help them provide that safety to them as well too, from little things like again reminders, make sure that light is green to remove that trailer from that dock door. Make sure that, for example, that you've connected your brake lines onto that trailer before you move it. So there's a lot of things that you can do from that aspect in order to make sure those individuals are doing what they should be doing. And then secondly, to your point earlier as well too, the reports are fantastic in that, to your point, you don't necessarily have to talk to the entire group to try and determine, hey, who actually did this, but we had an incident in the yard because through our system, you're right, you can have individual conversations and coaching moments with individuals to correct those actions because you know exactly who did what, when they did it, etc. So, from a management standpoint, that is a tremendous asset as well.
Oh yeah, the transparency, accountability, identify high performers, identify people who need additional training or coaching. Can't be overstated, honestly. And it's one of those things that I think some folks who are looking for a YMS, that may not be the top thing on their list, but is one of those extremely helpful time savers, money savers worth considering.
Sure.
I want to turn our attention sort of to the if we think about the Venn diagram, right, of keeping our employees safe and keeping our products safe. Before we move over to products, part of that Venn diagram that kind of overlaps those two, I think, is the dock doors and safety at the docks, specifically as it's related to, you mentioned earlier, things like dock locks, right? And having a lot of yards already have dock locks established at their operation, and they have the traffic lights identifying green or red. But nevertheless, in order to adhere to those protocols, they may need to, send a jockey driver, may need to drive up and down to find what trailers are available, and what trailers are safe to pull out, wasting time and wasting effort. So when we think about dock locks, a couple of things I wanted to mention here, and in general, some folks may call this the trailer and dock release, or TDR, process. Is anytime a trailer arrives or leaves a dock door, a yard management system can require a safety check to occur, so that for those organizations that are laser focused on ensuring that nothing happens at the docks, and again, worthwhile to consider, because 25% of issues that happen at warehouses happen at the docks. You can actually build that into the system, where a designated individual with a set of permissions in the system must go and validate that the safety protocols are being followed before anything can happen with that trailer arriving to, unloading, reloading, or departing the dock door. Some folks may call a trailer that's leaving a dock door prematurely or attempting to leave a dock door prematurely trailer creep. Trailer creep is something that is avoidable when you have a yard management system that's tied in with some hardware, even like dock locks. And whether or not there's an integration there, the two can be very, very helpful coexisting together. Some folks may want to integrate through software to actually, hey, when that light turns red on that traffic light, I want the dock door to turn red on the YMS. That's great. You can also do this as standalone and sort of supporting or complementary systems running alongside each other. Tools like EagleView that we mentioned, mapping systems that show the location of every asset in the yard, can reflect the statuses of those docks, the statuses of the trailers. Are they locked? Are they unlocked? Are they loading? Are they unloading? And what we do in our system is we entirely disable users from being able to move trailers if they're loading or unloading. It's just an easy way to say, no, you're not able to request a driver come pick up a trailer if it's in a status where it's unsafe to do so.
Sure.
Okay, so with that said, let's move over to product protection here. When we think about product protection or asset protection, this is another area of safety that I think is worth discussing and considering. And for those folks that may be listening who run or manage reefer operations, refrigerated or freezer operations, you know this better than anyone, right? Is keeping assets safe, keeping the product in those assets safe, can also, and is a big contributor to keeping your people safe. I was talking to an operation. Seve and I were actually on site there in Atlanta with one of our customers, and I was just kind of shooting the breeze with one of the employees. He mentioned, yeah, I was working at a reefer yard, and we had an issue where the reefer unit went down, and this was in Georgia in July or August. 90-degree plus temperatures outside, and this trailer essentially turned into an oven. They knew there was a problem, not because of any sort of system they had, but because when they were walking by the trailer, the flies that were buzzing around that trailer because of the rotting food inside were just horrendous. He said when they opened up the back, the smell was just horrible. And so not only, of course, did that facility lose all that product and I'm sure have to pay, but from an employee standpoint, what a pain in the butt to have to clean out those trailers and deal with hundreds of pounds of rotting food or rotting end product. So when we talk about reefers, fuel and temperature, fuel level of the unit and the temperature, the set temperature and the actual temperature of the reefer generally are where our minds go. Seve, I wanted to ask you, because of your background, 10 plus experience working with operations, many of them reefer operations, what are some of the product protection benefits of having a yard management system that can prioritize trailers based on their content, that can avoid, things like rotting? What are some of the hard benefits that you see from operations who prioritize focusing on product protection?
Yeah, well, obviously, preventing any loss of product is key. But in order to be able to do that, most organizations currently, if they don't have a system in place to help them with that process, they eventually miss something. They miss a trailer that's loaded. They forget that that trailer's been out there for a couple days. They forget that it's going to run low on fuel. So when you have a system that can remind you of those events and bring alerts through the system to say, hey, you've got a trailer out there that's only at a quarter of a tank right now. Someone needs to take action on it. That's a tremendous benefit for those organizations because, to your point, I've got lots of experience working with reefer operations, and I'll never forget my first true implementation with reefers. And this was at a location where essentially materials were brought in on hooves, like pigs, and then
Mm-hmm.
were taken out
Oh,
of the
on actual
facility.
pigs.
Yeah, the entire whole pig. Yeah, and they left the facility in
Wow.
packages. So it was the utmost most highest priority for that organization to make sure they had no spoilage in the yard. And really, what caused them to do this is they had an incident where they lost a trailer load of bacon. And that turned out to be, millions of dollars worth of food that was just spoiled due to the fact that they had not kept up with whether or not that unit had fuel in it or not. So I can tell you that it was extremely rewarding for me. 2 years later, I get a phone call from one of the individuals that's still at the site and calls me to thank me because I insisted that they put this solution in place here because this was a big reason why they were encountering some of the things they did. And he was thanking me profusely because they had just saved a load of bacon, similar to the scenario that they had had over 2 years ago. And that was very rewarding for me because it puts it in place how some of these systems can help reduce those types of activities. And then again, not just safety for individuals, but also safety for consumers, to their customers, etc. It's a big thing in the industry. And the last thing I ever want to hear when I'm speaking to an opportunity is that, that's the first thing I ask them when I ask them, do you have reefers? And they say yes. Have you had loss in the yard? Typically, the answer is always yes, which I hate to hear because there are ways of preventing that.
I think the dad joke of the day here is let us save your bacon. Quite literally. Okay, let's think about this for a minute as well. I want to do a callback. Earlier in the episode, you were talking about avoiding mitigating risk, right? By keeping people who don't necessarily need to be running around the yard from doing so. This links very closely in with reefers. A lot of facilities I speak with who do not have a designated YMS system are doing 10, 12, or more checks a day, right? And these aren't just yard checks, these are temperature checks to validate that, yeah, we're saving our own bacon, right? And so if you can have a system, and again, we never tell anybody temp checks, yard checks are going away. I think any
Yeah,
yard worth their salt is going to double and triple check that everything is going according to plan. But
yeah,
even if that can be reduced down from 10 or 12 down to 5 or 4 reefer or temperature checks per day, that's a huge amount of savings. Cutting that time in half, cutting the amount of time that employee is spending just walking around the yard in half, and often 2, 3, 4 employees. If you're paying them $22.50 an hour, you do the math on how much you're going to save each year. It works out to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So by mitigating the amount of risk associated with employees walking around doing this stuff, you can save time, save money. The other area that I had thought about was fuel checks. A lot of times when a jockey driver is doing a temp check, they have to get out of their jockey vehicle to check the fuel on that reefer unit. That requires physically getting out of the vehicle, walking out on the street, going over, checking, and then getting back. That's a lot of movement. If we can, again, mitigate the amount of risk involved in those movements, you can mitigate personnel safety, or you can increase personnel safety and mitigate risk there as well.
sure.
Let's talk about let's talk a little bit about theft prevention. Uh, you know, this is, again, maybe some operations is going to be huge, right? Because they have a very locked down facility and barbed wire surrounding the whole facility. In some operations, it's like, yeah, come on in, not a big deal.
Yeah,
But nobody likes to get their stuff stolen. I think that's safe to say, right? So from a theft prevention standpoint, only allowing assets, only allowing people onto your yard who are allowed to be there, and preventing assets from leaving the yard when they're not supposed to leave can prevent things like theft or even just accidental departures or arrivals before they need to be there. To your point earlier, Seve, employees or rather vendors coming on site as well, that can be a huge boon in tracking those. From a theft prevention standpoint, I'm curious if you have any other thoughts or ideas with your experience in how YMS can help in that area.
Yeah, no, sure. So you brought up a good point too. With a YMS coming in and going, from the arrival and departure process, it can help identify individuals that are on your yard trying to take a piece of equipment out of it that shouldn't be in your yard. So yeah, I've seen that occur before. There's a lot of different, use cases that I've seen where individuals get access into a yard and they leave with a trailer full of refrigerators, for example. And again, I'm speaking from experience. Um, this was a opportunity where this location had gate guards, was allowing entry and exit of particular trailers. But prior to the system, there was really no way of verifying that, hey, this driver that's coming onto my site should be on my site. And when they're leaving on the departure site, again, should this driver be leaving with this product? So, to your point, introducing these systems, making sure that these individuals have the correct paperwork, credentials, uh, PO numbers, load numbers, you name it. There's plenty of ways to identify these types of trailers that are coming in and out. Instead of just allowing someone to say, "Hey, I'm here to pick up a load," they allow them entry into the yard. They depart on the departure side, and they may go out there and check. Okay, I'm leaving with a loaded trailer, but they really do no other checks and balances to make sure that that's an actual load that should be associated to that driver leaving the facility. So yeah, again,
Yeah.
these types of systems help prevent all of that. And again, you can only imagine what a trailer full of refrigerators cost as well.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah,
Well, and that jogged my memory. We had a customer, a container operation down south, who they asked us. We really want to reduce the need for personnel at the gate or remove it entirely. So we implemented a automatic gate check in, check out, touchscreen kiosk for a driver to check themselves in and out of the yard.
excellent.
Even at those operations, even at those operations, again, now you're sort of outsourcing that role of manually having to check the trailer to a computer. That's great, but you still want to be able to validate that the driver's leaving with the correct asset. And so
That's
even in
correct.
these cases, we put in checks where a office employee or somebody who has the correct administrative privileges can go in and mark, that container is ready to go, so that it can be checked out effectively through that gate system. Saves money at the gate, but it also helps prevent things like theft or accidental departures there.
Yep, for sure.
I think to wrap up a little bit, I want to talk through some maintenance things. Maintenance is one of those areas of asset safety that I think jumps out at me as something a lot of operations could benefit from, especially like trucking yards, terminals. These sorts of operations where maybe they're not so concerned. Maybe they don't even have docks, so that 25% OSHA metric means nothing to them. But
Right.
when you start talking maintenance and you start talking about the bays, it becomes very important. Um, one of the customers recently that we implemented for had a concern where their maintenance for their vehicles. Oftentimes they weren't finding out that a vehicle needed a preventative maintenance or a DOT inspection until that trailer was already loaded and getting ready to depart. And then they
Right.
go, okay, now we got to unload it and bring it to the bay, and it's a nightmare and a headache. To
Yep.
avoid all of those headaches and nightmares, being able to show visually on a map, hey, this trailer that's flashing orange on Eagle View, that means that it needs an inspection, and provide those maintenance personnel with a list and a button where you can hit send a maintenance, and a maintenance guy goes and picks it up and brings it over and accomplishes that automatically is just massive.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's an important call out here as well as on the maintenance side. Any thoughts from your end there, Seve?
No, you're absolutely right, Colin. I've been a part of some organizations that want us to help, enhance their maintenance systems that they already have in house. And one way to do that is integrating with our solutions. So to your point, we prevent trailers that need a DOT inspection or need an oil change or whatever it may be from preventing them from leaving the yard. I've had customers that are very strict on those particular types of rules where, to your point, they show up at the gate, that trailer needs to go through an inspection process, and guess what? It's loaded. Well, they've got no choice. They will not allow that trailer to leave that facility. So back to the dock, put another dock door, a trailer, empty trailer next to it, and then do the swap out. Uh, you're right. It just wastes way too much time. It slows down opportunities to get products to customers. And you're absolutely right. Those are types of things that, again, can be prevented if you have a solution that will provide you with those alerts, bells and whistles to let you know that, hey, we have a unit out there that is in yard and needs to go through a maintenance protocol. And, again, the benefits of doing that automatically without any human intervention, looking for those types of traders, looking at dates, etc., is again invaluable in the ability to be able to provide those services in a simple way.
Well, and you bring up a good point too. I think about feedback loops in the yard and how a lot of what drives why companies want a YMS is a lack of visibility, a lack of communication, overall disorganization. They're doing their best, but the tools they have aren't servicing them well. What we've done in our system is incorporated positive feedback loops. For example, a trailer looks good. You look at it on your laptop screen there, and everything looks good about it. You send a jockey driver over. They get there, and there's 2 flat tires, right? And they go, well, I'm not moving this sucker. And incorporating in right on that jockey driver's screen in the cab of their vehicle, the ability to say that's damaged. I can see it. Take a picture of the damage, upload that so that everybody is on the same page instantly. And now you're not having to go out and do those yard checks and figure out what's happening. And there's no time delay. It's all synced instantly.
For sure, for
All
sure.
of this means all of these maintenance ideas and philosophies and principles and tools that we're mentioning. What does this all mean? Again, we're optimizing inspection and maintenance for the trailers that need it most without having to dig through a bunch of paperwork. We're preventing accidental movement of damaged trailers, again, harkening back to employee safety. Drivers in many of our customers' yards cannot move a damaged trailer, an out-of-service trailer. And again, just as an extra step to keep the equipment safe, but also to keep that end user, that driver or that employee safe as well, and really just eliminate that risk across the board.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's that in a nutshell. I think that's like product protection. I think we just did like the once around the world of product protection. But before we close out here, Seve, I wanted to give you an opportunity. Are there any other examples or things that come to mind when you think of product protection?
Yeah, from a product protection standpoint, and just in general, I want to point this out too for those of you that may not be familiar with YMS solutions. And this goes across the board for any YMS solution that I've ever been a part of. A lot of times customers are concerned with drivers having tablets in the cab, thinking that that's going to distract them and they can do, for example, texting and driving on the tablet. I will tell you that every YMS organization that I've ever been a part of is very, very good about understanding the safety of that and allows very simple responses back and forth with a yard driver. So you can put a comment in on a move request for a driver, and he can read that comment on there, whether it be make sure that the trailer's been pulled away from the door, whatever the case may be. But in addition to that, it's not as if we allow drivers to get on there and respond back through a keyboard with a message back to the inside of the warehouse. I think that's something that we need to
Yeah.
focus in and also explain as well too, Colin, because I think, well, I know I've had conversations with organizations that are concerned about those types of things. But then when I also explain how we mitigate all of that ability to have an accident due to the fact that a driver may be distracted due to the tablet on their cab, essentially they do absolutely no pointing and clicking on that particular tablet while they are moving. It's always when they're stationary. So, in an effort to minimize opportunities where that could change with them entering comments or responding back to a particular request through the tablet. Again, I haven't seen any YMS system that does that. And it's done for that very reason. They want to keep drivers safe. They want to keep people in the yard safe. And the last thing you want is distracted drivers in that yard.
That's a phenomenal point. That's a phenomenal point, Seve. I think, one of the things we do is canned responses. They only have a set amount of responses, and they're only able to do that before they actually start moving the trailer. Right? Once it's en route, the only thing you can do is say I'm done. So it's a key point of any good YMS system out there will prioritize safety, because we know that for our customers, keeping their employees safe, keeping their carriers that are coming onto their yard, their customers, any vendors safe, and keeping their product and their assets safe is like the low hanging fruit, right? If we can do all of that, if we can keep everybody safe across the board, you're already looking at incredible efficiency gains. You're already looking at minimizing the need to conduct those physical yard checks, keeping people out of the yard that don't need to be there, in their vehicles, and eliminating that risk. So all good points. I want to close out today. Just say thank you if you're listening to this. We really appreciate it. Feel free to pass it along to any other coworkers, friends, or colleagues in the industry that may find it beneficial to think about yard management. It's one of those areas of the supply chain, like I mentioned at the beginning, that often gets overlooked. So every couple of weeks, Sev and I are going to come back with another topic, discuss another facet of the industry. If you're interested in hearing a specific discussion item, or you even want to come on the show, we'd love to have you. You can go right on our website, yardmanagementsolutions.com, and just fill in a contact us form there, and we'll get in touch with you. If you're interested in implementing a yard management system for your yard, or if you know somebody who is, we also have a demo request form on our website. You can go right on there, yardmanagementsolutions.com, request a demo. We'd love to sit down and have a longer conversation with you. Because look, prioritizing safety, you can't really put a price on that, right? We can try, and I think we've done our best in this episode to do so. But at the end of the day, keeping your employees safe and keeping your products safe, I think is something that everybody understands should be a priority, and a yard management system is going to be the best way to do that as soon as that product leaves your operation, leaves your warehouse there. So thank you very much. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, wherever you are listening to this. If you're in your car, if you're at work, I hope you're not listening to it at work. If you're at home, have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to bringing you another topic here in a couple of weeks. Thanks for joining me again, Cedric.